A lonely orphan boy sits and cries by his mother's grave every day because he misses his mother, the only relative in the world who has left him. Many times he has thought of suicide and whispered by the grave, "Take me with you," with utter despair. But there are consecutive events that miraculously revive the boy and bring him to a mysterious journey. Please subscribe to the channel and comment where you are watching the video to join me on the journey of this brave boy. The rain came down in sheets, a cold, gray curtain that blurred the edges of Cedar Street. Ethan Parker stood there, soaked to the bone, his sneakers sinking into the muddy yard of the old house. He was 10 years old, small for his age, with dark hair plastered to his forehead and eyes red from crying or maybe from the rain. He couldn't tell anymore. His fists pounded the warped wooden door, the sound swallowed by the storm. "I know you're in there," he shouted, voice cracking. "You knew my mom. Tell me what happened to her. Please." Inside, Maggie Carter froze, her breath catching in her throat. She stood by the window, peering through a crack in the dusty blinds, her fingers trembling around the edges of an old wooden box she'd pulled from under the couch. The kid's voice cut through the drumming rain like a knife, sharp and desperate. She hadn't seen him before, not up close, anyway, but she knew who he was. Those eyes, that stubborn jaw. He looked too much like Lydia. Too much like the past she'd spent years running from. "Not now, kid," she whispered to herself, clutching the box tighter. "They're still out there." Ethan didn't stop. He slammed his shoulder into the door, the frame rattling. "I found the note. It said your name, Maggie Carter. You know something?" His words tumbled out, half sob, half scream. He didn't care that his jacket, his mom's old denim one, too big for him, was heavy with water, or that his hands were raw from pounding. He'd walked 2 miles from the orphanage in this mess, dodging the back roads, just to get here. He wasn't leaving without answers. Maggie's heart thudded. She glanced at the box, its carved lid worn smooth from years of hiding. She'd promised Lydia she'd keep it safe, but she'd never promised to open it. Not until now. Not until this kid showed up, dragging her ghost back to life. She took a step toward the door, then stopped as headlights sliced through the rain outside. A car, black, sleek, out of place in this rundown corner of Oak Hollow, rolled slowly down Cedar Street. Maggie's stomach dropped. "Oh, hell no," she muttered, ducking below the window. "They're here." Ethan saw the lights too. He froze, fists still raised, his breath puffing out in quick, panic bursts. The car paused at the end of the street, engine idling, like it was waiting for something or someone. He didn't know who they were, but he'd heard enough whispers at the orphanage to guess it was good. Kids said Cedar Street was cursed, that people who went looking for answers there didn't come back the same. He didn't care. He'd lost everything already. "Maggie!" he yelled again, slamming the door one last time. "I ain't leaving till you talk to me." That did it. The door flew open, and Maggie grabbed his arm, yanking him inside so fast he stumbled. She slammed it shut, locking the deadbolt with a shaky hand. "You got a death wish, kid?" she snapped, her voice low and rough. "You don't just show up here hollering like that. Not with them out there." She was in her late 40s, wiry and tough, with gray streaks in her brown hair and shadows under her eyes that said she hadn't slept right in years. The living room smelled like stale coffee and mildew, cluttered with old newspapers and a sagging couch. Ethan wrenched his arm free, glaring up at her. "I don't care who's out there. I found your name in my mom's jacket. Maggie Carter, Cedar Street. She knows." "What does that mean? What happened to her?" His voice broke on the last word, and he swiped at his face, angry at the tears mixing with the rain. Maggie stared at him, her jaw tightening. She didn't want this, didn't want him here, digging up things she'd buried deep. But those eyes, Lydia's eyes, wouldn't he let her look away? "You shouldn't have come," she said finally, setting the box on a rickety table. "Your mom, she was my best friend. That's all you need to know right now. Go back to wherever you came from before you get us both in trouble." "The orphanage?" Ethan spat the word like it tasted bad. "I ain't got nowhere else. She has gone, and you're the only one who knows why." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a crumpled scrap of paper, the ink smudged but still readable. He held it out, his hand shaking. "This was hers. She wrote it. Tell me what it means." Maggie took the paper, her fingers brushing his cold ones. She unfolded it, and there it was, her name, her address, in Lydia's messy scrawl. "She knows." The words hit her like a punch. She'd always figured Lydia had left something behind, some breadcrumb to the truth, but seeing it now, in this kid's hands, made it real. Too real. Outside, the car's engine revved, then faded as it turned the corner. Maggie let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. "All right, kid," she said, voice softer now. "You want to talk? Fine. But not here. Not tonight. You gotta get out of sight before they come back." Ethan shook his head, stubborn as ever. "I ain't running. Not till you tell me." Maggie sighed, rubbing her temples. "You're just like her, you know that? Lydia never knew when to quit either." She glanced at the box, then back at him. "I don't have all the answers. Not yet. But I'll tell you this, she didn't die in no accident. That fire? It was random. And if you keep poking around, you're gonna end up just like her." Ethan's eyes widened, but he didn't back down. "Then tell me who did it. Tell me why." Maggie opened her mouth, but before she could answer, a shadow moved past the window, quick, deliberate. She grabbed Ethan's arm again, pulling him toward the back door. "Move now," she hissed. "We're out of time." Ethan didn't remember much after that, just the blur of rain and the sound of his own heartbeat as Maggie shoved him out into the backyard. The forest loomed ahead, a tangle of pines and kudzu that swallowed the edge of Cedar Street. "Run, kid," she said, shoving him forward. "Don't look back." He wanted to argue, to demand more, but the fear in her voice stopped him cold. He took off, legs pumping, the muddy ground sucking at his shoes. Behind him, headlights flared again, closer this time. He heard a car door slam, boots crunching on gravel. A man's voice cut through the storm, low and hard. "Where's the kid, Maggie?" Ethan didn't wait to hear her answer. He plunged into the trees, branches clawing at his face, his mom's jacket snagging on thorns. He didn't stop until the lights faded, and the only sound was the rain pounding the leaves above him. He sank to his knees under a big oak, chest heaving, and pulled the jacket tighter around him. It still smelled like her, like laundry detergent, and the faint hint of her perfume, even after 3 years. He'd been 7 when she died, when the fire took their little house on Maple Lane. The cops said it was a gas leak, an accident. But Ethan never believed it. Not when he'd heard her screaming that night. Not when he'd woken up in the hospital with nothing but this jacket and a hole where his mom used to be. Every day since, he'd gone to her grave. Oak Hollow Cemetery was a half-mile from the orphanage, past the railroad tracks and the rusted-out water tower. He'd sneak out after supper, when the sky turned purple and the crickets started up, and sit there till dark. He'd talk to her, cry to her, beg her to come back. "I miss you, Mom," he'd whisper, tracing her name on the stone. Lydia and Parker, 1988-2022. Some days, when the loneliness got too heavy, he'd lie down on the grass, cold seeping through his clothes, and say it louder. "Please take me with you. I don't want to be here without you." The other kids at Oak Hollow Home for kids laughed at him for it. Crybaby Ethan, they'd call him, snickering when he came back with dirt on his knees and tears on his face. Your mom has gone, dummy. She ain't coming back. He'd curl up on his bunk, staring at the ceiling, and tell himself they were wrong. She was still out there, somehow, watching him, waiting for him. That's why he'd kept her jacket, why he'd checked every pocket till he found that note. It was her voice, reaching out from the grave, telling him to keep going. Now, huddled in the woods, Ethan wiped his face with a muddy sleeve. Maggie's words echoed in his head. She didn't die in no accident. His stomach twisted, fear and hope tangling together. If she was right, if someone had taken his mom from him, then he wasn't just a kid missing his mom, he was a kid with a fight on his hands. And he wasn't gonna let them win. He didn't know who they were yet, or why Maggie was so scared, but he knew one thing, he'd be back. Tomorrow, or the next day, or every damn day till he got the truth. He stood up, legs shaky, and started the long walk back to the orphanage. The rain didn't let up, but he didn't care. For the first time in 3 years, he felt something besides sadness, a spark, small but fierce, lighting up the dark. Behind him, the forest swallowed Cedar Street, and somewhere in the night, a man with a flashlight swept the shadows, looking for a boy who wouldn't stop running. Ethan slipped through the back gate of Oak Hollow Home for Kids just as the sky started to lighten, a faint gray creeping over the horizon. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but his sneakers squelched with every step, leaving muddy prints on the cracked concrete path. He didn't care. His mind was still spinning from Cedar Street, Maggie's scared eyes, that car in the dark, the way she'd said his mom's death wasn't an accident. It buzzed in his head like a swarm of bees, loud and relentless. The orphanage loomed ahead, a squat, ugly building with peeling gray paint and windows that never quite shut right. The air inside always smelled like damp socks and burnt toast, no matter how much the staff scrubbed. Ethan hated it here, hated the creaky bunks, the thin blankets, the way the other kids looked at him like he was broken. Most of all, he hated that it wasn't home. Home was gone, burned to ashes 3 years ago, and all he had left was this place, and the graveyard half a mile away. He crept past the kitchen, where Miss Linda, the night cook, was humming some old country tune over a pot of oatmeal. She didn't hear him, nobody ever did when he snuck out. He'd gotten good at it, moving quiet as a shadow, ever since he'd started going to his mom's grave every day. It was the only place he could breathe, the only place he could talk to her without feeling like a fool. His bunk was in the boys' dorm, a long room with 10 metal beds lined up like soldiers. He climbed onto his, the springs groaning under his weight, and pulled his mom's jacket tight around him. It was still damp, clinging to his skin, but he didn't take it off. It was the last piece of her he had, blue denim with frayed cuffs, a little rip on the elbow from when she'd caught it on a nail in their old garage. He pressed his face into the collar, breathing in that faint scent of her, and let the tears come again. They always did, no matter how hard he tried to stop them. "Ethan?" A whisper cut through the dark, soft but sharp. He jerked his head up, wiping his eyes quick. Tina Lopez stood by his bed, her dark braid swinging as she leaned in. She was 11, a year older than him, with brown eyes that saw too much and a grin that said she didn't take crap from anybody. She'd been his best friend since she showed up at the orphanage 2 years ago, after her parents died in a factory accident up in Knoxville. "You're soaked," she said, keeping her voice low so the other boys wouldn't wake up. "Where do you go this time? The graveyard again?" Ethan nodded, then hesitated. Tina knew about his trips to the cemetery. She'd caught him sneaking out a dozen times, and never snitched, but he hadn't told her about Cedar Street yet. He wasn't sure he could. Not until he figured out what it all meant. Yeah, he mumbled, sticking to the half-truth. Just needed to see her. Tina frowned, crossing her arms. She was wearing an oversized Titans hoodie, the blue faded from too many washes, and her socks didn't match, one red, one green, probably swiped from the laundry pile. You're gonna get sick out there, you know. Raining like that? You're nuts. She paused, studying him. You look worse than usual, though. What is up? Ethan didn't answer right away. He stared at the ceiling, where a water stain shaped like a lopsided heart spread over the tiles. The dorm was quiet except for the soft snores of the other boys, Tommy with his asthma wheeze, little Joey muttering in his sleep. He could feel Tina waiting, patient but stubborn, the way she always was when she knew he was hiding something. I found something, he said finally, voice barely above a whisper. He dug into the jacket pocket and pulled out the note, still damp but intact. He handed it to her, watching her eyes narrow as she read it in the dim light filtering through the blinds. Maggie Carter, Cedar Street. She knows. Tina looked up, her brow furrowing. Who is Maggie? And what does she know? Ethan swallowed hard. I don't know yet. But I went there tonight. To her house. She said my mom didn't die in an accident. The fire it was a mistake. Tina's eyes widened, but before she could say anything, a heavy thud echoed down the hall. Footsteps slow, deliberate, the kind that meant trouble. Ethan stuffed the note back in his pocket and yanked the blanket over his head, pretending to sleep. Tina darted to her own bunk across the room, diving under the covers just as the door creaked open. Harold Grayson stepped in, his shadow stretching long and thin across the floor. He was the head of Oak Hollow Home for Kids, a tall man with a buzz cut and a face like a slab of concrete, hard and cold. He wore a gray flannel shirt tucked into jeans, and his boots clicked on the linoleum with every step. Ethan peeked out from under the blanket, holding his breath. Grayson didn't usually check the dorms this late. Something was off. The man's eyes swept the room, lingering on Ethan's bunk a little too long. Ethan's heart pounded so loud he was sure Grayson could hear it. Had someone seen him sneak back in? Or worse, had Maggie called the orphanage, ratted him out? Grayson grunted, a low sound in his throat, then turned and left, the door clicking shut behind him. Tina popped her head up as soon as he was gone. That was close, she whispered. What is his deal tonight? I don't know, Ethan said, sitting up. But I think he is hiding something. Maggie was scared, Tina. Like real scared. And there was this car, someone else watching her. Tina chewed her lip, thinking. You think Grayson is in on it? I've seen him acting weird lately. Last week, I caught him in his office burning papers in the trash can. He yelled at me to get out, said it was private business. Ethan's stomach twisted. Grayson had always been strict, locked them in their rooms for talking back, cut their supper if they broke rules, but this felt different. Bigger. We gotta find out, he said. If he knows something about my mom, I need to know too. Tomorrow, Tina said, nodding. After breakfast, we'll figure it out. But you gotta dry off first, or Miss Linda's gonna skin you alive for tracking mud everywhere. Ethan managed a small smile, the first one all night. Tina had that way about her, making things feel less heavy, even when they were falling apart. He peeled off the jacket, laying it over the edge of his bunk, and crawled under the blanket. Sleep didn't come easy, though. His mind kept drifting back to the graveyard, to the cold stone under his fingers, the way the wind carried his whispers when he talked to his mom. He'd started going there right after the fire, back when the dirt over her grave was still fresh and the flowers from the funeral hadn't wilted yet. At first, it was just once a week Sundays, when the orphanage took them to church and he could slip away during the hymnals. But then it turned into every other day, then every day, like a habit he couldn't shake. He'd sit there, cross-legged in the grass, and tell her everything, how the kids at school called him orphan boy, how the oatmeal at breakfast tasted like glue, how he missed her singing him to sleep with that old Dolly Parton song she loved, Jolene. Most days, he'd cry till his throat hurt, tears soaking into the earth like they could reach her somehow. "I miss you, Mom," he'd say, over and over, his voice breaking on the words. "Why do you have to go? Why do you leave me here?" The stone never answered, just stared back at him with her name etched in block letters, Lydia and Parker, 1988-2022. Beloved daughter, loving mother. That's what it said, but it didn't say how she'd laughed like a kid when they'd chase fireflies in the backyard, or how she'd burn the mac and cheese every time she tried to cook it. Some days, the sadness got so big it swallowed him whole. He'd lie down next to the grave, the grass damp against his cheek, and stare up at the sky, gray and endless, like the hole inside him. "Please take me with you," he'd whisper, his voice so small it barely made a sound. "I don't want to be here without you. I can't do it." He'd imagine her reaching up through the dirt, her warm hand pulling him down to wherever she was, away from this place where nothing felt right. But she never did. The sky stayed empty, and he'd drag himself back to the orphanage, hollowed out and aching. Tonight was different, though. Tonight, he had something, a thread to pull, a chance to find out why she was gone. Maggie's words kept replaying in his head. She didn't die in no accident. It made him mad, madder than he'd been in a long time. If someone had taken her from him, if that fire wasn't just bad luck, then he wasn't gonna let it go. He couldn't. He must be dozed off eventually, because the next thing he knew, the morning bell was clanging through the dorm, loud and shrill. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, weak and watery, painting stripes across the floor. The other boys groaned, rolling out of their bunks, but Ethan stayed still, his eyes on the jacket draped over the rail. It was dry now, stiff with mud, but it still held that faint whiff of her. "Up and at 'em, Parker!" Tommy's voice cut through the haze. He was 12, big and loud, with a smirk that never quit. "You sleep like a damn log. Dreaming about your mommy again?" He laughed, elbowing Joey, who snickered along. "Shut up," Ethan muttered, swinging his legs over the side of the bunk. His fists clenched, but he didn't swing. Not today. He didn't have time for them. Tina caught his eye from across the room, giving him a quick nod as she tied her sneakers. They'd talk after breakfast, like she'd said. He pulled on a clean shirt, well, clean enough, with only one ketchup stain, and headed for the mess hall, the note burning a hole in his pocket. Breakfast was the usual, lumpy oatmeal and watery orange juice, served on chip trays. Ethan sat at the end of the table with Tina, away from Tommy and his crew. Miss Linda shuffled around with her ladle, humming that same tune, "I Will Always Love You This Time," another one his mom used to sing. It made his chest hurt, but he shoveled the oatmeal in anyway, barely tasting it. "So," Tina said, keeping her voice low as she poked at her food, "you really think Grace and S got something to do with this Maggie lady? And your mom?" Ethan nodded, glancing over at the staff table where Grayson sat, sipping black coffee and flipping through a clipboard. His face was blank, but his eyes kept darting to the door, like he was waiting for something. "Maybe. He has always been weird, but last night he looked at me like he knew I'd been gone. And Maggie was scared of someone. What if it's him?" Tina leaned in, her braid brushing the table. "I told you, I saw him burning stuff. Papers, files, whatever. He freaked when he caught me looking. Said it was private business and locked the door after. That ain't normal." "No, it ain't," Ethan agreed. He pushed his tray away, appetite gone. "We gotta get into his office. See what he has hiding." Tina grinned, a spark in her eyes. "Now you're talking." "After chores, when he is out front yelling at the delivery guy. We'll sneak in." Ethan nodded, but his mind was already drifting back to the graveyard. He could see it clear as day, his mom's stone tilted just a little to the left, the way the oak tree's shadow fell over it in the afternoon. He'd go there again today, after they checked Grayson's office. He had to tell her what he'd found, had to ask her to help him figure this out. She'd listen. She always did, even if she couldn't answer back. The bell rang again, signaling the end of breakfast. Kids shuffled out to start their chores, sweeping floors, washing dishes, folding laundry. Ethan grabbed a broom, his hands moving on autopilot while his brain churned. Maggie, the note, Grayson, that car in the rain, it was all connected, he could feel it. And somewhere in the middle was his mom, waiting for him to put the pieces together. He just hoped he was strong enough to do it. Because every time he closed his eyes, he saw her grave, felt that cold grass under him, and heard his own voice begging, "Please take me with you." He didn't want to go, not really, not anymore. But he needed her help to stay, to fight, to find out why she'd left him behind. Across the room, Grayson's eyes flicked to him again, and Ethan's grip tightened on the broom. Whatever was coming, he wasn't backing down. Maggie Carter sat on the edge of her sagging couch, the wooden box resting on her lap like a ticking bomb. The house on Cedar Street was quiet now, the rain reduced to a soft patter against the roof, but her nerves were still buzzing. That kid Ethan had torn open a door she'd nailed shut years ago, and she didn't know if she could close it again. She ran a hand through her gray-streaked hair, her fingers snagging on a knot, and let out a shaky breath. "What the hell am I supposed to do now, Lydia?" she muttered to the empty room. The living room was a mess, piles of yellowed newspapers stacked on the coffee table, a cracked mug of cold coffee sitting next to an ashtray she hadn't touched in months. Cobwebs clung to the corners, and the faded floral wallpaper peeled at the edges, curling up like it was trying to escape. Maggie didn't care. This place wasn't a home, it was a hideout, a bunker where she'd buried herself after everything went to hell. She'd stopped caring about a lot of things since Jake died, her son, her light, gone in a screech of tires and twisted metal 10 years back. He'd been 5, all gap-toothed smiles and sticky hands, and losing him had carved a hole in her she couldn't fill. Then Lydia went up in flames 3 years ago, and whatever was left of Maggie just crumbled. She stared at the box, its carved lid worn smooth from years of being handled, then hidden, then forgotten. Lydia had given it to her a week before the fire, her eyes wild with something Maggie hadn't understood at the time. "Keep this safe," she'd said, pressing it into Maggie's hands outside the diner on Main Street. "For Ethan. It's his future." Maggie hadn't asked questions, she'd been too tired, too wrapped up in her own grief to push. She'd taken the box, shoved it under her bed, and told herself she'd deal with it later. Later never came. Not until tonight, when Ethan showed up, soaking wet and screaming her name like a ghost come back to haunt her. Her fingers brushed the latch, hesitating. She didn't want to open it. Didn't want to know what Lydia had left behind, what she'd died for. But Ethan's voice wouldn't leave her head, those desperate, broken words. Tell me what happened to her. She'd seen Lydia in him, in the stubborn set of his jaw, the way he wouldn't back down even when that car rolled by, its headlights slicing through the dark like a warning. Maggie knew who was in that car. She'd spent years watching her back, waiting for them to come for her too. She closed her eyes, and Jake's face swam into view, his freckled cheeks, his messy blonde hair, the way he'd giggled when she'd chased him around their old backyard. She'd been dreaming about him again lately, more than usual. In the dreams, he was always holding a key, small and silver, dangling it in front of her with that goofy grin. "Help him, Mom," He'd say, his voice clear as a bell. He is crying like I did? She'd wake up sweating, her heart pounding, wondering who he was. Now she knew. It was Ethan Lydia's boy, the kid she'd failed by running away. Maggie opened her eyes and flipped the latch. The box creaked as she lifted the lid, the sound loud in the silent house. Inside was a jumble of stuff, a USB drive, scratched and scuffed a folded piece of paper that looked like a map, edges frayed, and a note, written in Lydia's messy handwriting. She pulled the note out first, her hands trembling as she unfolded it. Vincent knows. He'll kill for it. That was all it said, 5 words that hit her like a freight train. Vincent Caldwell, her old boss at Hollow Mill, the lumber plant that shut down years ago. The man who turned Oak Hollow into his personal kingdom, buying up land and greasing palms till no one dared cross him. She dropped the note like it burned, her breath hitching. Memories flooded back her and Lydia, 20-something and broke, working the line at Hollow Mill back in the early 2000s. It was good money, better than slinging hash at Dottie's diner, but the place had a shadow over it. Machines broke down too often, workers got sick coughs that wouldn't quit, rashes that spread like wildfire. Lydia started asking questions, digging into the barrels of chemicals they dumped out back when no one was looking. Maggie told her to stop, to keep her head down, but Lydia wouldn't listen. "This ain't right, Mags," she said, her voice fierce. "They're poisoning the whole damn town." One night, Lydia showed up at Maggie's trailer, a stack of papers in her hands, test results, shipping logs, proof that Vincent was cutting corners, dumping toxic waste into the creek that fed Oak Hollow's water supply. "We can take this to the EPA," she said, eyes blazing. "Shut him down for good." Maggie panicked. She'd seen what happened to people who crossed Vincent, layoffs, accidents, disappearing acts. She begged Lydia to let it go, but Lydia just shook her head. "I got a kid now, Mags. I'm doing this for Ethan." Maggie backed out. She quit the mill, moved to Cedar Street, and cut ties. She'd heard whispers later, Lydia talking to lawyers, making calls to Knoxville, but she didn't check in. Didn't want to know. Then the fire happened, and the official story was a gas leak, a tragedy, case closed. Maggie didn't buy it, but she didn't dig either. She ran, like she always did, hiding in this falling apart house with her ghosts. Now, she unfolded the map, her hands steadier. It was a hand-drawn sketch of Hollow Mill, every building, every back door, even the old drainage pipe snaking under the property. A red X marked a spot in the basement, labeled Storage B. She frowned, trying to remember. Storage B was where they kept the barrels, the ones Lydia swore were leaking something nasty. The USB had to be connected. Maybe it held the proof Lydia had collected, the stuff she'd died for. Maggie leaned back, the couch springs creaking under her. She should opened this damn box years ago. Should stood by Lydia instead of chickening out. Guilt gnawed at her, sharp and familiar, but there was something else too, a flicker of anger, hot and alive. Vincent had taken her best friend, maybe even her son too, if those dreams meant anything. Jake's accident, hit and run, no witnesses, had always felt wrong, but she'd never had the guts to question it. Until now. She stood up, the box still in her hands, and paced the room. Ethan's face flashed in her mind, those red-rimmed eyes, that ragged determination. He was Lydia's kid through and through, and he deserved the truth. But telling him meant dragging him into this mess, putting a target on his back. That car last night wasn't random. Vincent's people were still out there, watching, waiting. She'd seen Ray's ugly mug behind the wheel, Vincent's fixer, a guy who'd break your knees for $100 and a beer. Maggie stopped by the window, peering through the blinds. The street was empty now, just puddles and shadows, But she knew better than to relax. She'd have to move fast, get to Ethan, warn him, figure out what to do with this box before Ray or someone worse came knocking. She couldn't run anymore. Not from this. She grabbed her coat, a beat-up leather thing she'd had since the 90s, and stuffed the box into a duffel bag. Her truck was out back, a rusty Ford that barely started half the time, but it'd have to do. She'd head to the orphanage, find Ethan, and tell him enough to keep him safe without pulling him in too deep. Maybe she'd even show him the note, let him hear Lydia's voice in those words. He needed that much, at least. As she stepped onto the porch, the wind picked up, rattling the loose shingles overhead. She locked the door behind her, though it wouldn't stop anyone determined to get in. The air smelled like wet earth and pine, a Tennessee morning after a storm. She took a deep breath, steeling herself. "I'm sorry, Lydia," she said aloud, her voice steady for the first time in hours. "I should have fought for you back then. I'll fight for your boy now." She climbed into the truck, the engine coughing to life after 3 tries. The headlights cut through the dawn haze as she pulled out, heading for Oak Hollow Home for Kids. She didn't know what she'd say when she got there, or how she'd keep Ethan out of Vincent's crosshairs. But she'd figure it out. For Lydia. For Jake. For the kid who'd brought her past crashing back. Down the street, a black car turned the corner, its engine purring low and quiet. Maggie didn't see it, but she felt it, a prickle on the back of her neck, a warning she couldn't ignore. Time was running out. Ethan crouched under the dripping branches of a pine tree, his breath puffing out in quick, white clouds. The forest behind Cedar Street was thick and dark, the kind of place where the air smelled like wet dirt and secrets. His sneakers were caked with mud, and his mom's jacket snagged on every thorn he passed, but he didn't stop running until the lights from that black car faded into the distance. His legs burned, his chest heaved, and his heart hammered so loud it drowned out the rain. He sank to his knees, the cold seeping through his jeans, and pressed his hands into the soggy ground. "I'm okay, Mom," he whispered, half to himself, half to her. "I'm still here." He didn't know who'd been in that car, or why Maggie had shoved him out the back door like the house was about to blow. All he knew was her voice, sharp, scared, telling him to run. And that man's voice, low and rough, asking, "Where's the kid, Maggie?" It sent a shiver down his spine that had nothing to do with the wet. Whoever they weren't just nosy neighbors. They were after him, or her, or both, and it all tied back to that note in his pocket. Ethan pulled the jacket tighter around him, the denim heavy with water. He could still feel her in it, Lydia Parker, his mom, the only person who'd ever made him feel safe. 3 years ago, she'd been there, tucking him into bed with a kiss on the forehead, promising pancakes for breakfast. Then the fire came, and she was gone, leaving him with nothing but this jacket and a million questions. He went to her grave every day because it was all he had left her name on a stone, a patch of grass where he could sit and cry and beg her to take him with her. "Please, Mom," he'd say, his voice breaking. "I don't want to do this alone." But tonight, alone was all he had. A twig snapped behind him, and he spun around, heart leaping into his throat. The woods were a maze of shadows, branches swaying in the wind, but he couldn't see anything or anyone. He held his breath, listening. Just the rain, steady and soft, dripping off the leaves. Maybe it was a deer, or a raccoon scavenging for scraps. Maybe he was jumping at ghosts. He exhaled, shaky, and leaned against the tree, trying to think. Maggie had said the fire was an accident. That meant someone said it, someone killed his mom. The thought made his stomach twist, anger bubbling up hot and fast. He'd always known the story, didn't he? Add up, the cops said it was a gas leak, but their old stove was electric, and his mom was careful, always double-checking locks and burners before bed. He told the social worker that a skinny lady with a clipboard who patted his head and said, "It's hard to understand, sweetie." He wanted to scream at her, but he was 7 and scared, so he just nodded and let them take him away. Now, at 10, he wasn't scared anymore. He was mad. Mad enough to walk 2 miles in the rain, mad enough to bang on Maggie's door till she answered. And she had sort of. She'd given him a piece of the puzzle, but not the whole picture. He needed more. He needed to know who they were and why they'd come for her tonight. Another snap, closer this time. Ethan froze, his eyes darting through the dark. A shape moved between the trees, a person, tall and hunched, picking their way through the underbrush. He ducked lower, pressing himself into the mud, his pulse racing. The figure stopped, maybe 20 feet away, and a flashlight beam swept the woods, cutting through the gloom. Ethan held his breath, flattening himself against the tree. The light lingered, then swung away, and he heard a muttered curse, low, gravelly, a man's voice. It was the guy from the car. Had to be. Ethan's mind raced. If he stayed here, he'd get caught. If he ran, he'd make noise, and that beam would find him fast. Didn't he have a plan? Didn't he have anything but the jacket, and the note, and a whole lot of panic? Then he saw it, a rusted-out shed, half hidden by kudzu, maybe 50 yards to his left. If he could get there, he might have a chance. He waited till the flashlight turned the other way, then bolted, keeping low and quiet as he could. The mud sucked at his shoes, branches clawed at his face, but he didn't stop. He reached the shed, its metal walls dented and streaked with rust, and slipped inside through a gap where the door hung loose. The air smelled like oil and rot, and something skittered in the corner, probably a rat, but he didn't care. He crouched behind a stack of old crates, peering out through the crack. The flashlight beam swept closer, bobbing with the man's steps. Ethan caught a glimpse of him, big, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark coat and a ball cap pulled low. The guy stopped again, muttering something Ethan couldn't make out, then kicked at a fallen log like he was pissed. The beam swung toward the shed, and Ethan ducked, holding his breath till his lungs burned. After a long minute, the light moved off, and the footsteps faded into the trees. Ethan let out a shaky sigh, slumping against the crates. His hands were trembling, his knees weak, but he was alive. For now. He needed to get back to the orphanage, tell Tina what happened, figure out their next move. But first, he had to catch his breath, had to think. The shed was a junk heap, rusted tools scattered on the floor, a busted lawnmower tipped against the wall, a pile of mildewed tarps in the corner. Something caught his eye, though a small, boxy shape sticking out from under the tarps. He crawled over, pulling it free. It was an old radio, the kind with a crank handle and a cracked plastic case. Probably dead, but he turned the dial anyway, more out of habit than hope. Static hissed through the speaker, faint and scratchy. He twisted the knob, and then a voice. Clear, warm, unmistakable. "Maggie, if I don't make it, take care of Ethan." His mom's voice. Ethan's hands froze, the radio slipping in his grip. He stared at it, eyes wide, like it might disappear if he blinked. The static swallowed the sound again, but he heard it, her, Lydia, talking to Maggie like she knew something bad was coming. He cranked the handle, desperate, and the voice came back, fainter this time. "They're watching us. Vincent's people. If they find out what I've got, they'll..." The recording cut off, drowned in a burst of noise. Ethan shook the radio, tears stinging his eyes. "Mom, come on, talk to me," he whispered, his voice cracking. "What do you mean? Who has Vincent?" But the static stayed silent, and the shed felt smaller, colder, like it was closing in. He clutched the radio to his chest, rocking back and forth. It was really her, not just a memory or a dream. She'd left this, somehow, somewhere, and he'd found it. A message from the grave, telling him to keep going. He wiped his face with his sleeve, mud smearing across his cheek, and took a deep breath. "Okay, Mom," he said, louder now. "I'll find Maggie again. I'll figure it out. I promise." Footsteps crunched outside light, quick, not like the man's. Ethan tensed, gripping the radio, ready to run. Then a familiar voice hissed through the gap. "Ethan? You in there?" "It's me." Tina poked her head in, her braid swinging, her eyes wide with worry. She was soaked too, her Titan's hoodie clinging to her shoulders, a flashlight in her hand. "Tina?" Ethan scrambled up, relief flooding through him. "How do you?" "I followed you, dummy," she said, stepping inside. "Saw you sneak out after supper. Figured you'd do something stupid. Then I heard that car, and holy crap, what happened?" She stopped, staring at the radio in his hands, then at his muddy, tear-streaked face. He didn't know where to start, so he just blurted it out. "Maggie said my mom's death wasn't an accident. Someone else after her after me, maybe?" And this? He held up the radio, his voice shaking. "It's got her voice on it. She said Maggie is supposed to take care of me. She said they're watching." Tina's mouth dropped open, but before she could answer, a rock sailed through the air outside, smacking the shed wall with a loud clang. They both jumped, spinning toward the gap. The flashlight beam was back, closer now, sweeping the trees. Tina grabbed Ethan's arm, yanking him down. "That's the guy," she whispered. "Big dude, creepy vibes. I saw him chasing you." Ethan nodded, his throat tight. "We gotta get out of here." Tina didn't argue. She tossed the rock back out, aiming it at a tree to the right, and the beam swung that way, buying them a second. "Come on," she said, pulling him toward the gap. They slipped out, ducking low, and bolted into the woods, the radio tucked under Ethan's arm. The rain picked up again, masking their footsteps as they ran, weaving through the pines. Ethan's legs screamed, but he didn't stop, Tina right beside him. They didn't know where they were going, just away, back to the orphanage, back to safety. The flashlight faded behind them, and the night swallowed them whole. "I'm not giving up, Mom," Ethan thought, his breath ragged. "Not till I know everything." He'd find Maggie again. He'd make her talk. And whoever took his mom was gonna pay. Ethan and Tina didn't stop running until the trees thinned out, and the dim glow of Oak Hollow's streetlights flickered into view. The rain had turned the ground to sludge, and Ethan's sneakers slipped with every step, but he kept going, the radio clutched tight against his chest. His mom's voice still echoed in his head. "Maggie, if I don't make it, take care of Ethan," like a lifeline pulling him through the dark. Tina stayed close, her flashlight bouncing as she scanned the shadows, her breath coming in quick gasps. They didn't talk, didn't dare, not until they were sure the guy with the flashlight was behind them. They stumbled onto the railroad tracks that cut through town, the rusted rails slick and gleaming under the drizzle. Ethan slowed, his legs shaking, and leaned against a weathered signpost. "Oak Hollow, Pop 2347. Tina caught up, switching off her flashlight and shoving it in her hoodie pocket. "You okay?" she asked, her voice low, her eyes darting back toward the woods. "Yeah," Ethan lied, wiping mud off his face with his sleeve. His heart was still racing, and his hands wouldn't stop trembling, but he didn't want her to worry. "You didn't have to come after me, you know. Could we gotten caught?" Tina snorted, brushing wet bangs out of her eyes. "And let you get nabbed by some creep in a car? No way. We're in this together now, Ethan. You're stuck with me." She grinned, but it didn't reach her eyes. She was scared too, he could tell, but she wouldn't admit it. That was Tina, tough as nails even when she didn't have to be. He managed a small nod, grateful in a way he couldn't put into words. "Thanks," he said, his voice rough. "I mean it. Don't get all mushy on me," she said, nudging his shoulder. "What s with that radio anyway? You said it's got your mom's voice?" Ethan held it up, the cracked plastic glinting faintly in the streetlight. "Yeah. Found it in that shed. She was talking to Maggie, said something about Vincent's people watching her, and if she didn't make it," he trailed off, swallowing hard. "She knew, Tina. She knew something was gonna happen." Tina frowned, chewing her lip. "Vincent, that name mean anything to you?" "Not yet," Ethan said. "But Maggie acted like she knew who it was. She was scared, real scared. Said the fire was an accident." He tightened his grip on the radio, his knuckles white. "I gotta find out what she meant. What she was hiding." Tina nodded, her expression serious. "Then we need more than a busted radio. We need proof something Grayson can't burn in his trash can. Something Maggie can't dodge." She paused, then snapped her fingers. "The mill. Hollow Mill. You said your mom and Maggie worked there, right? That photo you found in Grayson's office, it's gotta be connected." Ethan's mind flashed to the picture his mom and Maggie, young and smiling, standing in front of the old lumber plant. The man next to them, blurry but sharp-eyed, stuck in his head too. "Yeah," he said slowly. "Maybe that's where it started. Whatever she was fighting, it's south tied to that place. Then that's where we go," Tina said, decisive. "Tonight. Before Grayson figures out you're digging." Ethan hesitated. "It's late. And that guy he is still out there." "Exactly," Tina said, crossing her arms. "He is looking for you near Maggie's place, not some rundown mill half a mile from town. We've got a window. We sneak out after lights out, hit the mill, see what's what. You in?" Ethan looked at her, then down at the radio. His mom's voice rang in his ears, faint but fierce. He thought of her grave, the cold stone he sat by every day, the way he begged her to take him with her. "Please take me with you," he whispered, over and over, till his throat went raw. But she hadn't. She'd left him here, left him this, her voice, her fight. He couldn't stop now. "I'm in," he said, meeting Tina's gaze. "Let us do it." They made it back to the orphanage, just as the supper bell rang, slipping through the back door while Miss Linda was busy dishing out watery stew. Ethan stashed the radio under his bunk, covering it with his pillow, and they blended into the crowd of kids shuffling to the mess hall. Grayson was there, standing by the door with his clipboard, his eyes scanning the room. Ethan kept his head down, but he could feel the man's stare linger on him, heavy and cold. Tina nudged him under the table, whispering, "He on to you. Keep cool." They ate fast, barely tasting the bland food, and waited till lights out at 9. The dorm went dark, the snores and rustles of the other boys filling the silence. Ethan lay still, counting the minutes, till Tina tapped his bunk with her foot. They slipped out, quiet as shadows, and crept past the kitchen, where Miss Linda's radio played Lowe's Sweet Home Alabama Tonight. The back door squeaked as they pushed it open, but no one came running. Hollow Mill was a hulking skeleton on the edge of town, its smokestacks jutting up like broken teeth against the night sky. The chain-link fence sagged in spots, easy enough to crawl under, and the main building loomed ahead, windows shattered, walls streaked with rust. Ethan's stomach churned as they approached, the air thick with the smell of damp wood and something sour he couldn't place. "This is it," he whispered, pulling the photo from his pocket to double-check. "Where they worked." Tina nodded, her flashlight flicking on low. "Let us find that basement." If there is anything left, it'll be down there away from the weather. They slipped through a side door, the hinges groaning, and stepped into a cavernous room littered with broken machinery and splintered planks. Dust hung in the air, tickling Ethan's nose, and the floor creaked under their feet. Tina swept the light around, picking out a rusted sign: basement access, storage AB. Bingo, she said, leading the way. The stairs were narrow, metal, and slick with mildew. Ethan gripped the railing, his heart pounding louder with every step. At the bottom, a hallway stretched out, lined with heavy doors labeled in peeling paint. They found storage B at the end, its lock busted, the door ajar. Tina pushed it open, and the beam lit up a room packed with metal barrels, some dented, some leaking a dark, oily sludge onto the concrete. "Whoa!" Tina breathed, stepping inside. "What is this stuff?" Ethan didn't answer. His eyes locked on a desk in the corner, piled with papers yellowed by time. He crossed the room, brushing cobwebs aside, and picked up a folder stamped Hollow Mill Confidential. Inside were test results, chemical names he couldn't pronounce, numbers circled in red, a handwritten note: creek contamination confirmed. Toxic levels unsafe. His hand shook as he flipped through, finding more shipping logs, memos, all signed V. Caldwell. "Vincent," he said aloud, his voice echoing. "This is what she found." Tina peered over his shoulder, her flashlight steady. "Your mom? She knew about this?" "Yeah," Ethan said, digging deeper. A notebook slipped out, small and battered, with his mom's handwriting on the cover: Lydia Parker, 2021. He opened it, his breath catching. Pages of notes, dates, names: Vincent Caldwell, Harold Grayson, even Maggie Carter. One entry stood out, dated a week before the fire. "Vincent burned my house. He'll come for Ethan next. If I don't make it, Maggie has the proof. Tell him I love him." Ethan's knees buckled. He sank to the floor, the notebook clutched to his chest. "She knew," he choked out, tears spilling down his cheeks. "She knew they'd kill her. Why didn't she run? Why didn't she take me with her?" His voice broke, raw and ragged, and he rocked back and forth, the words he'd said at her grave spilling out again. "Please take me with you, Mom. I didn't want to stay here without you." Tina dropped beside him, her hand on his shoulder. "Hey, Ethan, look at me," she said, soft but firm. "She didn't run 'cause she was fighting for you for this town. She wanted you to have this, to finish it. You're not alone, okay? I'm right here." He nodded, wiping his eyes, but the ache didn't fade. He flipped to the last page, finding a photo taped inside: his mom, Maggie, and that blurry man from Grayson's office, all at the mill. The man's face was clearer now, sharp jaw, cold eyes. Vincent Caldwell. And next to him, smirking, was Grayson. "Grayson," Ethan said, his voice hardening. "He was in on it. He helped Vincent." Tina's jaw tightened. "That bastard. Burning papers, watching you, he has covering his tracks." Ethan stood, shoving the notebook into his jacket. "Not anymore. We've got this now. We can stop them." A noise echoed above footsteps, heavy and slow, crossing the mill floor. Tina killed the flashlight, and they froze, listening. The steps stopped, then started down the stairs, deliberate, unhurried. Someone knew they were here. "We gotta move," Tina whispered, grabbing his arm. "Now!" Ethan nodded, his resolve stealing. He was running from this, not from Vincent, not from Grayson, not from the truth. His mom had fought for him. Now it was his turn. They slipped out the door, hearts pounding, and disappeared into the shadows of the mill, the notebook burning a hole in his pocket. Maggie's truck rattled down the back roads of Oak Hollow, the engine coughing like it was on its last legs. The dawn sky was a bruised purple, streaked with clouds that promised more rain, and the air streaming through the cracked windows smelled like wet pine and gasoline. She gripped the steering wheel tight, her knuckles white, the duffel bag with Lydia's box bouncing on the passenger seat. Ethan's face kept flashing in her mind, those desperate eyes, that stubborn tilt to his chin, so much like his mom it hurt to look at him. She'd failed Lydia once, running when she should be fought. She wasn't gonna fail her kid too. The orphanage wasn't far 10 minutes if the truck didn't die on her, but every mile felt like a lifetime. That black car last night, Ray's ugly mug behind the wheel, had her on edge. Vincent's people didn't mess around, and if they'd seen Ethan at her place, they'd be sniffing around for him too. She had to get to him first, warn him, give him enough of the truth to keep him safe without dragging him into the deep end. The USB, the map, that damn note Vincent knows. He'll kill for it burned a hole in her conscience. She should open that box years ago, should listen to Lydia instead of burying her head in the sand. She turned onto the gravel road leading to Oak Hollow Home for Kids, the tires crunching over loose stones. The building came into view, gray and squat, its paint peeling like old skin, windows glowing faintly with the early morning light. She parked by the fence, out of sight from the main entrance, and killed the engine. It sputtered to a stop, leaving her in silence except for the tick of cooling metal and the distant hum of cicadas. She grabbed the duffel bag, slung it over her shoulder, and stepped out, her boots sinking into the damp earth. The front door was locked too early for visitors, but Maggie wasn't here to play nice. She circled around back, past the rusted swing set and a pile of soggy cardboard boxes, until she found a service entrance cracked open. She slipped inside, the air hitting her with that familiar orphanage smell of disinfectant and overcooked oatmeal. The hallway was dim, lined with lockers and faded posters about teamwork and hope, but it felt more like a prison than a home. She could see why Ethan had run to her, why he'd rather face the rain than stay here. Voices drifted from down the hall, low, clipped, official. Maggie pressed herself against the wall, peering around the corner. Harold Grayson stood by the mess hall door, his buzz cut glinting under the fluorescent lights, talking to a woman in a cheap suit, probably a social worker. His clipboard was tucked under his arm, but his free hand kept twitching, like he was itching to hit something. Maggie's gut twisted. She'd never liked Grayson, even back when he was just a shift supervisor at Hollow Mill. He'd always been too cozy with Vincent, too quick to look the other way when barrels went missing or workers got sick. If he was part of this, if he'd helped Vincent take Lydia out, she'd make him regret it. She waited till the woman turned away, then darted past the mess hall, heading for the dorms. She didn't know Ethan's bunk number, but she'd figure it out. The boys' dorm was a long room, quiet except for the soft snores of sleeping kids. She stepped inside, scanning the bunks' metal frames, thin mattresses, a scattering of worn-out sneakers and comic books. Then she saw him, curled up on a bottom bunk near the window, his mom's jacket draped over him like a shield. "Ethan," she whispered, shaking his shoulder gently. "Hey, kid, wake up!" He jolted awake, eyes wide and wild, his hand clutching the jacket like he thought she'd take it. "Maggie?" he mumbled, blinking at her. "What re you?" "Shh!" She cut him off, glancing at the door. "We don't got much time. I need to talk to you. Somewhere private." He sat up, rubbing his eyes, and nodded. "Okay. There's a storage closet down the hall. Nobody checks it till noon." She followed him out, keeping low as they slipped past the other bunks. Tina stirred on the top bunk across from his, muttering something in her sleep, but didn't wake. The storage closet was a cramped space stuffed with mops and buckets, the air thick with bleach. Ethan shut the door behind them, and Maggie set the duffel bag down, her hand shaking as she unzipped it. "Listen, kid," She started, pulling out the box. I owe you an apology. I should be told you more last night, but I panicked. That car, those people, they're dangerous, and they're tied to what happened to your mom. Ethan's face hardened, but his eyes were still red, like he'd been crying before he fell asleep. You said it was an accident. Who did it? Who asked Vincent? Maggie took a deep breath, steeling herself. Vincent Caldwell. He ran Hollow Mill back when me and your mom worked there. Big shot around here, owned half the town, had the other half scared stiff. We found out he was dumping chemicals, bad stuff, the kind that kills slow, into the creek. Your mom wanted to blow the whistle, take him down. I didn't. I ran, left her to fight alone. Then she died, and I've been kicking myself ever since. Ethan stared at her, his fists clenching. So he killed her? Burned our house 'cause she wouldn't shut up? Yeah, Maggie said, her voice cracking. That's what I think. She gave me this. She held up the box. Before it happened. Said it was for you, for your future. I didn't open it till last night, after you left. There's proof in here, stuff she gathered to nail Vincent. A USB, a map, a note. She knew he'd come for her, Ethan. She died to protect you, to give you a shot at this. She opened the box, showing him the contents. Ethan reached for the note Vincent knows. He kill for it, and read it, his hands trembling. She knew, he whispered, his voice breaking. She knew, and she didn't tell me. I sit by her grave every day, Maggie. Every damn day, crying, asking her to take me with her. Why didn't she take me away? Why didn't she tell me so I could help? Maggie's throat tightened, tears prickling her eyes. She knelt in front of him, putting a hand on his shoulder. Because she loved you, kid. More than anything. She didn't want you in the crossfire. She begged me to keep you safe if she couldn't. I failed her then, but I'm here now. I'm not running anymore. Ethan swiped at his face, angry tears spilling over. I heard her voice. On a radio I found in the woods. She said you'd take care of me. Why didn't you come sooner? I've been alone, Maggie. 3 years, just me and that stupid grave. I'm sorry, Maggie said, her voice raw. I was scared of Vincent, scared of facing what I'd done. But I've been dreaming about my son, Jake. He died 10 years ago, hit and run, and I think Vincent had a hand in that too. Jake keeps telling me to help you, like he knew you'd show up. I'm here now, Ethan. I'll fight for you, I swear. Ethan looked at her, his eyes searching hers, and nodded slowly. Okay, but I'm not sitting back. I found stuff too at the mill with Tina. Papers, a notebook. Vincent and Grayson, they're in it together. They killed her, and I'm gonna make them pay. Maggie's jaw dropped. You went to the mill? Last night? Yeah, he said, pulling the notebook from his jacket. Look. She took it, flipping through Lydia's notes, dates, proof, that last entry, Vincent burned my house. He'll come for Ethan next. Her blood ran cold. Jesus, kid. You're braver than I ever was. But this is dynamite. We can use it, but we gotta be smart. Vincent S. got eyes everywhere, and Grayson S. right here. Footsteps echoed outside, heavy and fast. Maggie shoved the box back into the duffel, zipping it shut. That SRQ, she said, standing. We need to get you out of here, somewhere safe. Ethan shook his head. Not without Tina. She's in this too. Maggie nodded, impressed despite herself. Fine. We'll grab her and go. My truck is out back, one to be comfy, but it'll get us clear. They cracked the door, peering out. Grayson was in the hall now, barking orders at a kid with a mop, his face twisted in a scowl. Maggie's heart sank. He'd see them if they moved now. Wait, she whispered, pulling Ethan back. We'll go when he is distracted. Ethan gripped the notebook, his resolve hardening. I'm not letting him win, Maggie. Not after what he did to her. He won T, Maggie promised, her voice steady. Your mom fought for you. Now we fight for her. Together. They crouched in the dark, waiting for their chance, the weight of Lydia's promise binding them tighter than blood. Maggie held her breath, her back pressed against the storage closet door, as Grayson's boots clomped down the hall. The bleach-soaked air stung her nose, but she didn't dare move, not with Ethan crouched beside her, his eyes locked on the crack of light under the door. The kid was clutching the notebook like it was a lifeline, his knuckles white, his jaw set hard. She could feel the heat of his anger radiating off him, and it matched her own, a slow burn that had been smoldering for years, ready to catch fire. Grayson's voice barked outside, sharp and irritated. Tommy, I said mop the damn floor, not smear it around. You want to eat supper tonight or not? A kid mumbled something back, followed by the slosh of a mop hitting linoleum. Maggie peeked through the crack, catching a glimpse of Grayson's broad shoulders as he turned toward the mess hall, his clipboard slapping against his thigh. He was distracted for now. All right, kid, she whispered, nudging Ethan. When he is out of sight, we grab Tina and bolt. My truck is by the fence. You ready? Ethan nodded, his voice low but steady. Yeah. Let us do it. They waited till Grayson's footsteps faded, then slipped out, moving fast and quiet down the hall. The dorm was still dark, the other kids stirring as the morning bell clanged somewhere in the distance. Tina was already up, lacing her sneakers on the top bunk, her braids swinging as she glanced their way. Her eyes widened when she saw Maggie, but she didn't hesitate, hopped down, grabbed her hoodie, and met them by the door in seconds. What is going on? She whispered, eyeing the duffel bag slung over Maggie's shoulder. Who is this? Maggie, Ethan said, keeping his voice hushed. She is with us. We're getting out of here now. Tina didn't blink. Good enough for me. Let us move. They darted through the back hall, past the kitchen where Miss Linda's radio crooned Tennessee Waltz, and hit the service entrance. The morning air was cool and damp, the sky a heavy gray that pressed down on Oak Hollow like a lid. Maggie led the way, her boots crunching on gravel as they rounded the building toward her truck. It was an old Ford F-150, rust eating at the fenders, but it did get them clear if it started. Get in, she said, tossing the duffel into the cab and climbing behind the wheel. Ethan and Tina piled into the passenger side, squeezing onto the cracked vinyl bench seat. Maggie turned the key, and the engine sputtered, coughed, then roared to life. Hold on, she muttered, throwing it into gear. They peeled out, gravel spitting under the tires, and headed for the back gate. Maggie kept one eye on the rear view, half expecting Grayson to come running out with that damn clipboard. But the orphanage shrank behind them, swallowed by the trees, and for a second, she thought they'd made it clean. Then headlights flared in the mirror bright, close, too close. A black car swung onto the road behind them, its engine growling like a predator on the hunt. Maggie cursed under her breath. Ray, she said, her grip tightening on the wheel. Vincent's guy. He has been tailing me since last night. Ethan twisted in his seat, peering out the back window. That is him? The creep from the woods? Yeah, Maggie said, flooring the gas. The truck lurched, rattling hard, but the black car kept pace, gaining ground. He is not here to chat. We gotta lose him. Tina leaned forward, her voice sharp. Turn off at Miller S. Road, it's narrow, cuts through the woods. He want to follow us there. Maggie nodded, yanking the wheel hard as they hit the intersection. The truck fishtailed, tires squealing, and plunged onto the dirt track. Branches scraped the sides, leaves slapping the windshield, but the black car stayed on them, its headlights piercing the dust cloud they kicked up. Ethan gripped the notebook tighter, his heart pounding. "What does he want with us?" "You," Maggie said grimly. "Or what you've got. That notebook, the stuff from the mill, it's enough to bury Vincent. He knows you're onto him now." The road twisted, dipping into a gully, and Maggie swerved to dodge a fallen log. The truck bounced, jarring their teeth, and Tina braced herself against the dash. "He is getting closer," she shouted, glancing back. The black car was a shadow now, inches from their tailgate, its horn blaring like a warning shot. "Hang on!" Maggie yelled, spotting a sharp turn ahead. She jerked the wheel, sending the truck skidding sideways, and for a second, it felt like they'd flip. The tires caught though, and they shot down a side path, the trees closing in tight. The black car missed the turn, its brakes screeching as it slid past, but Ethan knew it wouldn't stop. Ready to double back, he was too close to give up. They burst out of the woods onto Main Street, the heart of Oak Hollow, blinking awake Dottie's diner, with its neon sign flickering, the gas station still dark, a pickup idling outside the hardware store. Maggie didn't slow down, weaving through the sparse traffic, her eyes flicking to the mirror. "We need a crowd," she said. "Somewhere he can't grab you without witnesses." "Walmart," Tina said, pointing ahead. "It's open early. Lots of people." Maggie nodded, swinging into the parking lot. The lot was half full, morning shoppers, delivery trucks, a few old guys sipping coffee by their tailgates. She pulled into a spot near the entrance, cutting the engine. "Stay low," she said, ducking down. "He'll drive by, but he wouldn't stop here, not with all these folks around." Ethan and Tina slid down, peering over the dash. Sure enough, the black car rolled past, slow and deliberate, Ray's silhouette hunched behind the wheel. He didn't turn in, just kept going, disappearing around the corner. Ethan let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. "That was close." "Too close," Maggie said, sitting up. "He has not done. We need a plan somewhere to hole up, figure out what is next." Ethan pulled the notebook from his jacket, flipping to that last page. "Vincent burned my house. He'll come for Ethan next." "We've got this," he said, his voice steady despite the shake in his hands. "Proof he killed her. We can take it to the cops, right?" Maggie shook her head. "Not yet. Vincent's got half the sheriff's department in his pocket, always has. We need more, something they can't ignore. That USB, I haven't watched it yet. Could be the key." "Then let us watch it," Tina said, her tone firm. "My cousin works at the library, they've got computers there. We can go now, before Ray circles back." Maggie hesitated, then nodded. "All right. Library it is. But we move fast, no stopping, no looking back." They climbed out, blending into the trickle of shoppers heading inside. The library was a block away, a low brick building with a sign out front, Oak Hollow Public Library, EST 1952. Maggie parked around back, out of sight, and they slipped in through a side door, the smell of old books and dust hitting them as they stepped inside. Tina's cousin, Javier, was at the desk, a lanky guy in his 20s, with a mop of dark hair and a name tag pinned crooked. He grinned when he saw Tina, but his smile faded when he caught the tension on her face. "What is up, Prima?" he asked, leaning over the counter. "We need a computer," she said, keeping her voice low. "Private, no questions." "Can you help?" Javier raised an eyebrow, but didn't push. "Yeah, sure. Study room in the back, nobody's booked it till noon. You got $5 for the key?" Maggie dug a crumpled bill from her pocket, handing it over. Javier tossed her the key, and they hurried to the room, a small space with a table, a chair, and an ancient desktop humming in the corner. Ethan locked the door behind them, his pulse still racing, while Maggie plugged the USB into the port. The screen flickered, then a video loaded, grainy, shaky, time-stamped October 2022. Lydia's face filled the frame, her dark hair pulled back, her eyes tired but fierce. Ethan's breath caught, his chest tightening. "Mom," he whispered, leaning closer. "Ethan, if you're watching this, I'm so sorry," she said, her voice trembling but clear. "I tried to keep you safe, baby. Vincent Caldwell, he's behind it all. The mill, the chemicals, the cover-up. I've got proof, test results, recordings, everything. He burned our house to shut me up, but I got this out first. Maggie has got it now. Trust her, okay? She'll take care of you. I love you, Ethan. Always will." The video cut out, static filling the screen. Ethan's eyes burned, tears spilling over. "She knew," he said, his voice breaking. "She knew, and she still fought." Maggie put a hand on his shoulder, her own eyes wet. "She was the bravest person I ever met. We'll finish this for her, kid." Tina nodded, fierce. "Yeah. We've got the video. The notebook let us bury him." A loud thud shook the door, followed by a low, familiar voice. "Open up, Maggie. I know you're in there." "Ray." Ethan's blood ran cold. Maggie grabbed the USB, shoving it back in the duffel. "He found us," she said, her voice tight. "We're out of time." The door rattled, Ray's fist pounding harder. Ethan gripped the notebook, his resolve hardening. They weren't running anymore. Not from this. The door to the study room shook under Ray's fist, the wood groaning with every blow. Ethan's heart slammed against his ribs, his hands clutching the notebook so tight the edges bit into his palms. Maggie yanked the USB from the computer, shoving it into the duffel bag, her face pale but set hard. Tina darted to the window, peering through the blinds, nothing but the library's back lot, empty except for Maggie's truck and a dumpster. "He's alone," she whispered, turning back. "No car out there. We can make a run for it." "Not yet," Maggie said, her voice low and steady. She pulled a pocket knife from her coat, flicking it open with a soft click. "He's not getting this stuff, not the video, not the notebook. We've got one shot to end this, and it ain't here." Ethan swallowed, his throat dry. His mom's voice still rang in his ears. "I love you, Ethan. Always will," and it lit a fire in him, hotter than the fear. "Then where?" he asked, his voice steadier than he felt. "He'll just keep coming." Maggie met his gaze, her eyes fierce. "Hollow Mill. That's where it started, where your mom fought, where she hid the truth. We take it there, draw him out, get him on tape admitting it. Then the cops can't ignore us, Vincent as buddies or not." Tina nodded, her jaw tight. "Smart. But how do we get past him? He has gonna bust that door down any second." Maggie glanced at the table, then grabbed a chair, wedging it under the doorknob. "Buy us time," she said, moving to the window. She popped the latch, shoving it open, the cool morning air rushing in. "Out here. Truck us right there 10 feet tops. We haul ass, and he want to catch us." The door buckled, a loud crack splitting the silence. Ray's voice growled through the wood. "I ain't playing, Maggie. Open it, or I'll break it down and take the kid myself." Ethan's stomach flipped, but he didn't freeze. He climbed onto the sill, Tina right behind him, and dropped to the gravel below, landing hard but steady. Maggie tossed the duffel out, then swung her legs over, hitting the ground with a grunt. The door splintered behind them, Ray's boots crashing through, but they were already running, piling into the truck as Maggie jammed the key in the ignition. The engine roared, and she peeled out, tires spitting gravel as Ray burst from the library, his flashlight swinging wildly. He shouted something angry, guttural, but the truck was too fast, swinging onto Main Street and leaving him in the dust. Ethan twisted in his seat, watching Ray sprint to a black car parked around the corner. "He is coming," he said, his voice tight. "He is not giving up." "Good," Maggie said, her eyes locked on the road. "We want him to follow. Hollow Mill is our turf now." They tore through Oak Hollow, past the diner, the gas station, the sleepy storefronts just waking up. The mill loomed ahead, its jagged silhouette cutting the gray sky, a ghost of the town as past. Maggie swerved into the lot, parking behind a crumbling shed, out of sight from the road. "Get ready," she said, grabbing the duffel. "We're setting a trap." Ethan nodded, his mind racing. He thought of his mom's grave, how he sat there every day, crying, begging her to take him with her. "Please take me with you," he whispered, his voice lost in the wind. But she left him here for this to fight, to finish what she started. He wasn't begging anymore. He was ready. They slipped into the mill through the side door, the same one they'd used last night, the air heavy with dust and decay. Maggie led them to the basement, her boots echoing on the metal stairs. Storage B was just as they'd left it, barrels leaking sludge, papers scattered, the desk a shrine to Lydia's battle. Maggie pulled a small recorder from her coat pocket, testing it with a quick beep. "Found this in my glove box," she said. "If Ray talks, we've got him." Tina grabbed a rusty pipe from the floor, hefting it like a bat. "And if he doesn't, I'll make him." Ethan set the notebook on the desk, flipping it open to his mom's last entry. "Vincent burned my house. He'll come for Ethan next." He pulled the radio from the duffel, cranking it till static hissed, hoping for her voice again. Nothing came, but it didn't matter. She was with him in the notebook, the video, every step he took. Footsteps thudded above, heavy and deliberate. Ray had followed, just like they'd planned. Maggie nodded at Ethan and Tina, her knife still in hand. "Hide," she whispered. "Let him come to me." Ethan and Tina ducked behind a stack of barrels, the sour smell stinging their noses. Maggie stood by the desk, the recorder in her pocket, the USB and notebook in plain sight. The footsteps descended, slow and steady, and Ray stepped into the room, big, broad-shouldered, his ball cap pulled low, a flashlight in one hand, a tire iron in the other. His face was hard, scarred, but his eyes flickered with something, anger, maybe, or doubt. "You're a pain in my ass, Maggie," he said, his voice rough as gravel. "Hand over the kid and the stuff, and I'll make it quick." Maggie didn't flinch. "Not happening, Ray. You're done chasing us. Tell me why Vincent sent you. Tell me what he did to Lydia." Ray smirked, stepping closer, the tire iron glinting. "You know what he did. She stuck her nose where it didn't belong. Mill secrets, chemical dumps. Vincent don't like loose ends. Burned her house, made it look clean. Should got the kid too, but he slipped out." Ethan's blood boiled, his fists clenching behind the barrels. He wanted to lunge, to scream, but Tina grabbed his arm, shaking her head. "Wait," she mouthed. Maggie's voice stayed calm, baiting him. "And Jake? My boy? That hit and run, was that Vincent too?" Ray's smirk faltered, just for a second. "You don't want to know that, Maggie. Just give me the damn proof and walk away." "No," she said, stepping forward. "You're gonna talk, Ray. For Lydia. For Jake. For every kid Vincent has hurt." Ray lunged, swinging the tire iron, but Maggie was faster, ducked low, slashing at his leg with her knife. He roared, stumbling, and Tina sprang from behind the barrels, slamming her pipe into his knee. He dropped, cursing, the tire iron clattering to the floor. Ethan bolted out, grabbing it before Ray could recover, and stood over him, chest heaving. "Talk," Ethan said, his voice shaking with rage. "You killed my mom. Tell me why." Ray glared up at him, blood seeping through his jeans, but his eyes softened just a flicker. "I didn't want to, kid," he said, his voice low. "Lydia, she was good to me, back at the mill. Gave me lunch when I was broke, talked me out of quitting. Vincent ordered it, said she'd ruin him. I set the fire, but I didn't know you were in there. Swear it." Maggie pressed the recorder closer, hidden in her pocket. "Keep going," she said. "What about Jake?" Ray's shoulders slumped, defeat creeping in. "Vincent's idea. Said you'd talk if you ever found out about the mill. Made it look like an accident, drunk driver, no witnesses. I drove the car." Maggie's face crumpled, but she held it together, her voice steel. "And now? Why were you here?" "Vincent's orders," Ray said, wincing as he shifted his leg. "Get the proof, get the kid. Finish it." Ethan's hand shook, the tire iron heavy in his grip. He wanted to swing it, to make Ray feel every ounce of pain he'd carried for 3 years, every tear he'd cried at his mom's grave, every plea of "please take me with you." But he stopped, breathing hard, and dropped it. "You're done," he said, stepping back. "We've got you now." Tina kicked Ray's flashlight away, keeping her pipe raised. Maggie pulled the recorder out, hitting stop. "That's enough," she said, her voice raw. "Cops will all hear this. Vincent's finished." Ray laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "You think it's that easy? He owns this town, sheriff, judges, all of 'em. You've got nothing." "Not nothing," Maggie said, holding up the USB. "Lydia's video, your confession, the notebook. We'll take it higher, state police, FBI if we have to. You're the loose end now, Ray." Footsteps echoed above new ones, lighter, multiple. Maggie tensed, but a voice called down, sharp and official. "Oak Hollow Sheriff. Who is down there?" Tina's eyes widened. "Javier, he must be called M after Ray busted in." Maggie grabbed the duffel, shoving the recorder and USB inside. "Time to roll the dice," she said, helping Ethan drag Ray to his feet. "Let us see if they're Vincent's boys or not." They hauled Ray up the stairs, his leg dragging, and met 3 deputies in the mill's main room, young, nervous, hands on their holsters. The lead one, a guy with a buzz cut and a badge reading Deputy Hayes, stepped forward. "What is going on here? We got a call about a break-in at the library." Maggie didn't hesitate. "This man attacked us," she said, nodding at Ray. "He has confessed to arson and murdered Lydia Parker as death 3 years back. We've got proof. Vincent Caldwell is behind it. You gonna do your job, or you on his payroll too?" Hayes blinked, glancing at Ray, then back at Maggie. "That's a hell of an accusation. Let us see this proof." Ethan handed over the notebook, his hand steady now. Maggie played the recorder, Ray's voice filling the room. "I set the fire, Vincent ordered it." The deputies exchanged looks, tension crackling. Hayes nodded, slow. "All right. We'll take him in, check this out. You're coming to statements, all of it." Maggie nodded, relief washing over her. "Fair enough. Just don't let Vincent bury it." They cuffed Ray, hauling him out, his head bowed. Ethan watched him go, the weight of 3 years lifting, just a little. "We did it, Mom," he whispered, his voice soft. "We got him." Maggie put an arm around him, Tina on his other side. "Yeah, kid," Maggie said. "We got him. For her. For Jake." The mill stood silent behind them, its shadows fading as the sun broke through the clouds. The sheriff's station smelled like burnt coffee and stale cigarettes, a low hum of fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Ethan sat on a hard plastic chair in the waiting area, his mom's jacket draped over his lap, the notebook resting on top like a trophy. His sneakers were still caked with mud from the mill, and his hands felt raw from gripping the tire iron, but he didn't care. For the first time in 3 years, he felt something shift inside him, a weight lifting, not all the way, but enough to breathe a little easier. Maggie was across the room, talking to Deputy Hayes, her voice low and steady as she handed over the USB and the recorder. Tina slumped next to Ethan, her Titan's hoodie bunched up around her shoulders, her eyes half closed from exhaustion. They'd been here since dawn, giving statements, answering the same questions over and over. What happened at the library? Why do you go to the mill? Who asked Vincent Caldwell? Ethan's throat was hoarse, his head pounding, but he kept going, telling them everything. His mom's voice on the radio, the notebook, Ray's confession. He wanted them to hear it all, to make sure they couldn't bury it. Hayes scribbled notes on a pad, his face unreadable. "We've got Ray in holding," he said, glancing at Maggie. "He is not talking now, but that recording is solid. Arson, murder, serious charges. We're pulling Vincent in for questioning, but it'll take time. He's got lawyers thicker than flies on roadkill." Maggie nodded, her arms crossed. "Just don't let him wiggle out. Lydia deserves better than that. We'll do our job," Hayes said, his tone clipped but firm. "You three head home. We'll call if we need you." Home. The word hit Ethan like a punch. He didn't have one, not really. The orphanage wasn't home, it was a cage. His real home had burned down with his mom, leaving nothing but ashes and memories. He looked at Maggie, her tired eyes meeting his, and wondered if she felt it too, that hollow ache where family used to be. They stepped outside, the afternoon sun breaking through the clouds, casting long shadows across the parking lot. Maggie's truck sat there, dented and dirty, a survivor like them. "Come on," she said, fishing her keys from her pocket. "You're not going back to that dump. Not today." Tina perked up, rubbing her eyes. "Where are we going, then?" "My place," Maggie said, climbing in. "It's a mess, but it's better than bunk beds and Grayson's ugly mug. We'll figure the rest later." Ethan slid into the cab, Tina squishing in beside him. The ride back to Cedar Street was quiet, the rumble of the engine filling the silence. He stared out the window, watching Oak Hollow roll by, kids on bikes, old men smoking on porches, the diner buzzing with lunchtime chatter. It looked normal, peaceful, but he knew better now. Underneath, it was rotten, poisoned by men like Vincent who trade lives for a buck. Maggie's house was just as they'd left it, cluttered, dusty, a little sad. She kicked a pile of newspapers aside, dropping the duffel on the couch. "Ain't much," she said, shrugging. "But there's a spare room upstairs. You two can crash there till we sort this out." Ethan nodded, his throat tight. "Thanks, Maggie, for everything." She waved him off, but her eyes softened. "Don't thank me yet, kid. We're not done. Vincent is still out there. But you're safe here. That's a start." Tina flopped onto the couch, kicking off her sneakers. "Safe as good enough for me. I'm beat." Maggie smirked, heading for the kitchen. "I'll dig up some food, probably just canned soup, but it'll do. Rest up. You've earned it." Ethan didn't sit. He wandered upstairs, finding the spare room a small space with a twin bed, a chip dresser, and a window overlooking the backyard. He set the notebook on the dresser, running his fingers over his mom's handwriting. "Tell him I love him." He could still hear her voice from the video, see her face, tired but fierce. She'd fought for him, died for him, and now he was fighting back. It didn't erase the pain, nothing would, but it made it mean something. He sat on the bed, pulling the jacket around him. It still smelled like her, faint and fading, But there. He thought of her grave, the cold stone he cried over every day, the way he begged, "Please take me with you." He didn't want that anymore, not really. She'd left him here to live, to finish this, and he would. For her. A knock on the doorframe pulled him out of his head. Maggie stood there, holding a steaming bowl of tomato soup and a spoon. "Found something edible," she said, setting it on the dresser. "You okay, kid?" "Yeah," he said, managing a small smile. "Just thinking about her." Maggie nodded, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Me too. Lydia was tough as nails, smarter than me, braver too. She'd be proud of you, Ethan. Hell, I'm proud of you." He looked at her, the words sinking in. "What about you? Jake Ray said Vincent got him too. You okay?" Her face tightened, but she didn't look away. "Not yet. Losing him broke me, and knowing it was an accident that's a fresh cut. But getting Ray, going after Vincent, it's a start. Jake, that's why I'm here, same as your mom, that's why you are. They're still with us, you know?" "Yeah," Ethan said, his voice soft. "I know." Maggie stood, ruffling his hair. "Eat up. We'll deal with tomorrow when it comes." She left him there, the soup warming the room with its faint tomato tang. Ethan ate slowly, the heat settling in his chest, and felt a flicker of something, peace, maybe, or hope. He didn't have a home yet, not really, but this was close. Maggie and Tina, they were his people now, tied by loss and fight, and something stronger than blood. Days turned into weeks, and Maggie didn't send them back to the orphanage. She filed papers, made calls, fought the system with a stubbornness Ethan hadn't seen in her before. By mid-April, it was official, she was their guardian, temporary for now, but with a promise of more. Grayson got sacked after Reyes' confession leaked, the state sniffing around Oak Hollow home for kids, and Ethan didn't miss it one bit. Maggie sold the Cedar Street house, too many ghosts, she said, and they moved to a small cabin by Cherokee Lake, 30 miles east. It was a fixer-upper, with creaky floors and a leaky roof, but it had a porch overlooking the water, and the air smelled clean, free of Oak Hollow as shadows. Tina claimed the loft, turning it into a chaos of books and scavenged treasures, while Ethan took a room with a view of the pines, his mom's jacket hung on the wall like a banner. One afternoon, Maggie found a box in the attic, old stuff from her trailer days, before Cedar Street. Inside was a sketchbook, Jake's messy scribbles filling the pages. Ethan flipped through it, stopping on a drawing, a stick figure boy with dark hair, standing by a tree, labeled "My Friend." "That's you," Maggie said, her voice catching. "He drew that years ago, before you were even born." "Weird, huh?" Ethan stared at it, a chill running through him. "Yeah, weird. But it felt right, like Jake had known, like his mom had too. They'd sent Maggie to him, or him to her, either way, it fit. They settled in, the three of them, Maggie teaching Ethan how to fish, Tina rigging a tire swing by the lake, the cabin filling with noise and life. Vincent was still out there, lawyers stalling his arrest, but the state police were on it now, the USB and notebook locked in evidence. Ray turned state's witness, spilling more on Vincent as dirt enough to keep the heat on. Ethan didn't know if it'd stick, but it was a start. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the lake, Ethan sat on the porch, the notebook in his lap. He traced his mom's words, "I love you," Ethan, and smiled, a real one this time. "I'm okay, Mom," he said aloud, the breeze carrying his voice. "I've got a family now. We're gonna be all right." Maggie stepped out, 2 mugs of hot chocolate in her hands, Tina trailing with a bag of marshmallows. "Talking to her again?" Maggie asked, sitting beside him. "Yeah," Ethan said, taking a mug. "She asked listening." Tina grinned, tossing him a marshmallow. She'd better be. We're a mess without her." They laughed, the sound echoing over the water, and for the first time in years, Ethan didn't feel alone. The lake shimmered gold in the fading light, a promise of something new. The sun hung low over Cherokee Lake, painting the water with streaks of orange and pink as summer settled into Tennessee. Ethan sat on the cabin's porch steps, a fishing rod propped against his knee, the line bobbing lazily in the shallows. A soft breeze rustled the pines, carrying the smell of damp earth and grilling burgers from the barbecue Maggie had fired up out back. It'd been 3 months since the showdown at Hollow Mill, 3 months since Reyes' confession cracked Vincent's empire wide open, and Ethan still couldn't quite believe this was his life now: a cabin, a lake, a family. Tina's laughter rang out from the yard, sharp and bright, as she wrestled with a tarp they'd rigged into a makeshift slip and slide. She'd doused it with dish soap and a hose, and now she was sliding across it, crashing into a pile of leaves at the end with a whoop. "Eat your heart out, Ethan!" she yelled, grinning as she shook wet hair out of her face. Her Titan's hoodie was long gone, swapped for a tank top and cut-off shorts, and she looked happier than he'd ever seen her, free, like the weight of the orphanage had finally lifted. Maggie stepped out from the back, a spatula in hand, her old leather coat traded for a faded flannel shirt rolled up at the sleeves. "Burgers are almost done," she called, wiping sweat off her brow. "You two better clean up before you track mud all over my floor. I ain't mopping again." Ethan smirked, reeling in his line. "Yes, ma am," he said, mimicking her drawl. She shot him a playful glare, but there was a warmth in it, a softness that decrept into her edges over the months. He stood, brushing dirt off his jeans, and joined Tina by the slip and slide, dodging a splash she aimed his way. "Miss me," he said, laughing as she stuck out her tongue. He grabbed the hose, spraying her back, and for a minute they were just kids, silly, loud, alive. It felt good, like a piece of his mom was there in the chaos, laughing with them. They'd come a long way since Oak Hollow. The state police had taken Reyes' testimony and run with it, raiding Vincent's office in Knoxville, digging up files that matched Lydia's proof, chemical logs, payoffs, threats. Vincent was still fighting, his lawyers spinning delays, but the net was tightening. Last week, the news ran a storied local tycoon implicated in toxic dumping scandal, and Ethan had watched it with Maggie and Tina, a quiet satisfaction settling in his chest. It wasn't over, not yet, but it was close. Maggie had fought too, harder than he'd expected. She'd gone to court, faced down social workers, and a judge with a stack of papers proving she could take him and Tina. The cabin wasn't much: 2 bedrooms, a leaky roof they'd patched with tarp and duct tape, but it was theirs. She'd sold Cedar Street without a second thought, said it was time for a fresh start. Ethan didn't argue. That house held too many ghosts: Lydia's, Jake's, hers. Cherokee Lake was different. It was clean, open, a place to breathe. He still thought about his mom every day, still heard her voice in quiet moments: "I love you, Ethan. Always will." The ache was there, sharp some days, dull others, but it didn't swallow him anymore. He didn't go to her grave as much now, not because he'd forgotten, but because he didn't need to. She was with him here, in the notebook he kept on his dresser, in the jacket hung by his bed, in the fight they'd won together. Maggie called them over, plating burgers on a rickety picnic table she'd salvaged from a yard sale. "Get your butts over here," she said, setting out buns and a bag of chips. "Food is hot, and I ain't reheating it." They sat, the wood creaking under them, and dug in greasy burgers, salty chips, a jug of sweet tea sweating in the heat. Tina piled ketchup on her bun, grinning at Ethan. "Better than orphanage slop, huh?" "No contest," he said, taking a bite. The meat was charred just right, the bun soft, and it tasted like summer, like home. He glanced at Maggie, who was watching them with a small smile, and felt a lump in his throat. "Thanks, Maggie. For this. For everything." She waved him off, but her eyes glistened. "Don't get sappy on me, kid. You and Tina, you're the ones who kicked this off. I just followed your lead." "Nah," Tina said, nudging her. "You're the badass with the knife. We'd be toast without you." Maggie laughed, a real laugh, deep and rough. "All right, fine. We're a team. Happy now?" "Yeah," Ethan said, meaning it. "I am." They ate in comfortable silence, the lake lapping at the shore, cicadas humming in the trees. After, they cleaned up, Tina hauling the plates inside, while Maggie stoked the fire pit for later. Ethan lingered by the water, watching the sun sink lower, the sky turning a deep, endless blue. He pulled the notebook from his pocket. He started carrying it again, a habit he couldn't shake, and flipped to that last page. "Tell him I love him." "I know, Mom," he said softly, the words carried by the breeze. "I love you too." A hand landed on his shoulder, and he turned to see Maggie, her face lit by the fading light. "Talking to her again?" she asked, her voice gentle. "Yeah," he said, tucking the notebook away. "She is still here, you know." "I know," Maggie said, squeezing his shoulder. "Jake too. They're watching us, probably shaking their heads at how much trouble we get into." Ethan smiled, a real one, wide and easy. "Probably." "Come on," she said, nodding toward the cabin. "Tina got marshmallows. She's out gonna burn the place down if we don't stop her." They walked back, the fire pit crackling as Tina waved a flaming marshmallow on a stick, cursing when it dripped onto her shoe. "Help!" she yelped, laughing as Ethan grabbed the hose to douse it. Maggie shook her head, muttering about kids these days, but she joined in, roasting her own marshmallow till it was golden brown. They sat around the fire, the night closing in, stars popping out one by one. Ethan leaned back, the warmth of the flames on his face, and listened to Tina tell a wild story about a ghost she swore she'd seen by the lake. Maggie snorted, calling it nonsense, but her eyes twinkled, and Ethan felt it a bond, unbreakable, forged in loss and fight and love. A year later, on a crisp March morning, they drove back to Oak Hollow. Vincent S. trial had finally started. State charges, federal too, after the FBI took Lydia as proof and ran with it. Ray testified, spilling everything, and the news was everywhere. Tennessee businessman faces decades in prison. Ethan didn't watch much of it. He didn't need to. Justice was coming, slow but sure, and that was enough. They stopped at the cemetery, a quiet patch of green tucked behind the railroad tracks. Lydia's grave was still there, the stone weathered but clean, a few wildflowers growing at the base. Ethan knelt, setting a single daisy on the grass, something he'd picked by the lake that morning. "We got him, Mom," he said, his voice steady. "Vincent is done. I'm okay now. I've got Maggie and Tina. We're a family." Maggie stood behind him, her hands in her pockets, a small bouquet of daisies in her grip. She laid them next to Ethan's, her voice soft. "You did good, Lydia. He is a hell of a kid. I'm taking care of him, like you asked." Tina crouched beside Ethan, adding a pebble she'd painted with a smiley face, her own weird tribute. "She'd like this, right?" she asked, grinning. "Yeah," Ethan said, smiling back. "She would." They stood there a while, the wind whispering through the oaks, then headed back to the truck. The drive home was light, Tina blasting some pop song on the radio, Maggie grumbling about the noise, but tapping her foot anyway. Ethan watched the road roll by, the weight of 3 years finally gone, not erased, but carried, shared with the people beside him. Back at the cabin, they celebrated burgers again, a cake Maggie had baked lopsided but sweet, a toast with root beer in chip mugs. To Lydia and Jake, Maggie said, raising hers. And to us. To us, Ethan echoed, clinking his mug against theirs. The lake shimmered under the moon, a mirror of light stretching to the horizon. Ethan stepped onto the porch, the night cool against his skin, and looked out. I'm home, Mom, he said, his voice a whisper. Thanks for sending them to me. The stars blinked back, silent and bright, and for the first time, Ethan felt whole.